I mean, what I want to ask you, well, I'll just ask you, WTF? I mean, is this the kind of person that, if this is the person that they're looking for, who is on the surveillance video shooting the CEO in the back, turns out to be the person of interest in Altoona, Pennsylvania? Tell me what the profile that Sam Brock just detailed in his incredible reporting says to you.
Well, you're right to ask, because even NYPD has said in response to a press conference question, this guy was not on our radar screen. Why was he not on the radar screen? Because as they were combing through corporate security files on people who've threatened the company, people who maybe had claims rejected, frequent flyers with regard to threats, he's not coming up, at least not yet. They'll have to go back and comb through this. So we have a very bright young man with what would have been a very bright future, according to all that's been reported. But I zero in on his social media posts and also the books he's read. He's a voracious reader. And I want to caution everyone as I say this, we can't verify veracity of what people post on social media, but some of these facts are indeed coming together. So, for example, lots of posts on his X account about existential future of human society, the impact of technology on the human brain, the morality and ethics of murder, and whether it's ever appropriate or not. And then go over to his Goodreads account, which you'll see he's a voracious reader. Books he's read this year include Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. And he concludes after reading Kaczynski's writings that, yes, there are circumstances where it's okay to kill someone, and typically around the issue of money and corporate greed. So we're beginning to get a picture of someone who may not have ever been denied an probably not hurting for insurance coverage. So what we've got here is perhaps in his own mind an activist killer. And the question arises, was he on his way to kill again? Why did he keep that gun? Was he really interested in fleeing or getting caught? Why does he have his so-called manifesto in his backpack? What was he ready for? Where was he going? Had he simply given up or wanted to get caught? And if he's an activist, he'll be talking. Unlikely that he'll shut up because he'll want to say why he did this.
We are now going to bring into our conversation my colleague, NBC News national law enforcement and intelligence correspondent Tom Winter. Tom, Sam started off with some extraordinary reporting about who the individual arrested in Altoona is. I mean, Luigi Mangione doesn't sound like anyone that I've ever covered sitting in this chair as a suspect in a crime like this. I wonder if you can answer whether this is unique from your experience, Perch. And I know you have some more reporting on what Frank Figliuzzi is talking about. Jump in.
Well, sure. I mean, there's a whole host of things that they're looking at. They're looking at an online post, investigators are, to see whether or not it's in fact linked back to this individual, whether it's relevant in the investigation. But it has a lot to do. It has a lot to do with information about Ted Kaczynski, believe it or not, Nicole. So his ideology is unique, to put it mildly. And this individual, I think there's going to be, we'll look and see what the legal process is going to do here in the next 12 to 24 hours. And in fact, if they are the suspect. But there's an awful lot of information already and evidence that members of law enforcement have gathered that appears to draw closer and closer to this being the individual. I just think it's remarkable that an employee at a McDonald's had the wherewithal to look up, see this person, and call their local police today. It's kind of a case study, or a textbook example, I should say, of exactly what to do in these situations. So just an incredible day. And once the NYPD in the DA's office are able to look at all the evidence and kind of make sure it matches what they've been told, they arrived there a little after 3:15 Eastern time today. They'll be able at that point to what we refer to as dropping papers on somebody, so be able to bring some charges. So that's where this case is at this point.
Tom Winter, the employee at McDonald's is the example of something that went right. I mean, how did a person who was in a fraternity with members of his family in elected government not look up at what was, I mean, you've described it as one of the most brazen assassinations on the streets of New York City in decades. I mean, how did everyone, I mean, why did the employee at McDonald's see him before any of his family or friends did?
Oh, boy, that's going to be a big question, Nicole. And reporters, you can bet, are gathering around the houses of the relevant parties that are involved here to ask those questions. And certainly, I would think that if it was my a relative or a friend of mine, that I would be able to point that person out. They do have two pictures in the clear. This is from the taxi that he used to get up to the George Washington Bridge, according to the NYPD, this person of interest. So we're just going to have to see where all that goes. There'll be a lot of reporting that'll be done in the next couple of days. I'm not probably in the same league as Frank on this and many other issues, but just as far as in terms of charging somebody for not reporting to the FBI, but I think that is, or the Justice Department, but I think that's something that's well down the road before we have that discussion.
Andrew Weissman, your thoughts on all of it?
Well, this reminds me at the FBI, when things break, the one thing you know is that you don't know the whole story yet. That's like for sure. There's no question this is a tragedy, and the issue is sort of like what to make of this beyond that. I immediately start thinking, given the age and what we've just heard about mental health issues, that may not be an issue. I'm just saying that's where I'm thinking about it, especially when you have, as Frank said, odd behavior afterwards, and odd behavior beforehand, like going to the Starbucks and sort of being careful and also not being careful, and then having all of this information, all of this incriminating evidence, assuming this is the person, which is clearly what the police are intimating, that he didn't dispose of it. And that suggests some either wanting to get caught and or some mental health issues. But I think the sort of follow-up thought I had was the one you had with respect to the family members and friends. It's, given how that this person was not that careful, it's great that he's caught, but where was the NYPD? I mean, this took quite a long time when, we're sitting here at a studio that is blocks from where this happened. And the idea that it took 5 days to find him when the person was not being that careful. I mean, the first thought.
Or running very far. I mean, you could get halfway around the world in 6 days.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the information that he had his passport with him, and then you were thinking, okay, how did this person not get caught sooner? When the idea, the sort of broad speculation was, is this somebody who is like a professional hitman? And then you hear details that are like, well, of course not, because of all sorts of aspects of how sort of sloppily this was done. And it sort of makes you realize this was sort of old-fashioned detective work in some ways, which is there was a wanted poster and somebody very clever and smart, and also a good citizen called it in. But I think it sort of remains to be seen on the big picture. What do you make of this? Is this something that's inspired by people who think that you can take the law into their own hands, people who resort to violence without it being condemned in a larger perspective? In other words, we're in a political climate, but we don't know if that's really going to be representative of this case. It could be a much more individual story. I sort of end with, it is a tragedy on a human scale. I think the reaction of some, not many, but some that view this as not a tragedy is, to me, the one take home that I think all of us can have, which is that we're living in a time where there isn't a consensus when something like this happens, that this is a tragedy and should be prevented.